Alright, let's get right into this because the tag deadline just gave us clarity on something a lot of 49ers fans were watching closely. Eddie Pinheiro was not franchise tagged. And honestly, this was expected, but it still matters. The franchise tag for a kicker this year would have come in at over $6 million. That's based on the average of the top salaries at the position. And when you look at it from the 49ers perspective, that number just doesn't make sense. If you tag him at over $6 million, you're instantly giving up negotiating leverage. You're basically telling the player and his agent, "We think you're worth top-of-the-market money." That makes it harder to work out something closer to $5 million or slightly under. And I truly believe that's where the 49ers want this deal to land, somewhere in that $4.5 to $5 million range annually. We've seen this before. Back in 2019, the 49ers used the franchise tag on Robbie Gould. But that was different. They used it strategically to extend negotiations and ultimately got a long-term deal done. In this situation, the tag price is just too high. So instead, they'll continue negotiating the standard way. Now here's the question I want to ask you directly. Do you think Eddie Pinheiro is worth $5 million per year? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. I want to see where the faithful stand on this, because this decision isn't about whether he's good, it's about resource allocation. Every dollar matters when you're trying to build a Super Bowl roster. And if you overspend at kicker, that's money you're not spending somewhere else, like edge rusher, offensive line, or wide receiver. Speaking of tags, there was one used at quarterback that could ripple through the league. Daniel Jones received the transition tag. Not the full franchise tag, but the cheaper version. That number is still massive at $37.8 million. What that means is he can negotiate with other teams, and the Colts would have the option to match. Why does that matter to the 49ers? Because when quarterback markets move, everything moves. If someone overpays for a quarterback, it tightens cap flexibility across the league. And when that happens, surprise free agents hit the market. That's how opportunity opens up. And here's the subtle layer to all of this. When teams use their one tag on a quarterback, they can't use it elsewhere. That becomes important in a minute when we start talking about wide receivers. But before we move there, if you're new to the channel, and you want breakdowns like this every single time major 49ers news drops, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing hard toward 2,000 subscribers, and I want you part of this community before we hit that mark. Turn on notifications so you never miss a move. Because now, the receiver market just got very interesting, and this next piece could directly impact San Francisco's off-season strategy. Now this is where things start getting really interesting, because the Colts using that transition tag on Daniel Jones created a domino effect that could quietly benefit the 49ers. And that name you need to pay attention to is Alec Pierce. Since Indianapolis used their one available tag on the quarterback, they can't use it on Pierce. That means if they don't hammer out a deal quickly, he's headed straight to free agency. And when you look at this receiver market, that's a big deal. Pierce has size. He has vertical speed. He's a true outside presence. And when you picture him in this 49ers offense, it actually makes sense. Think about what this offense looks like when it has a legitimate downfield threat who can stretch coverage and open space underneath. It changes how defenses align. It lightens boxes. It creates space for the run game. It forces safeties to respect the deep ball. Now, I'm not saying he's a superstar, but in this system, with this play design, he could absolutely thrive. And here's the bigger picture. The wide receiver market overall is getting crowded. You're looking at potential names like Mike Evans possibly hitting free agency, Jawan Jennings potentially entering the market, Romeo Doubs, Jalen Naylor. When supply increases, pricing gets complicated. Some players get overpaid, some become bargains, and smart teams capitalize. So let me ask you something. If you had to choose, Would you rather the 49ers invest their big money this offseason in a wide receiver or in an edge rusher? Drop WR or edge in the comments. I want to see what direction you think this roster needs most, because that's the real tension right now. The offense is explosive, but could it use another dimension? Absolutely. But defensively? That's where the championship ceiling conversation really begins. And before we shift into the edge rusher chaos that's unfolding, quick timeout, faithful. If you're enjoying this breakdown and you want this channel to keep growing with better production, deeper analysis, and more consistent coverage, now is the time to step up. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, and every single one of you matters. And if you really want to fuel the quest for the next Super Bowl trophy, use the Super Thanks or Hype feature right below this video. That's not a donation. That's you investing in the growth of this community. It helps upgrade the channel, improve content quality, and build something special for the faithful. We're in this together. All right. Now let's talk about where the real fireworks could happen. Because the edge rusher market right now, it's chaos. You've got Max Crosby sitting there with the Raiders demanding what sounds like Micah Parsons-level compensation. We're talking potentially 2 first-round picks and an impact player. That's an astronomical asking price. And for the 49ers, that just doesn't make sense. As great as Crosby is, mortgaging that kind of draft capital could cripple roster flexibility for years. So unless that price drops dramatically, it feels unrealistic. But then there's Jonathan Greenard. And this one feels more attainable. The Vikings are reportedly open to listening on trade offers. He's 28 years old. He had a 12-sack season not long ago. He's a true 3-down edge defender. And the injury that slowed him last season? Shoulder, not lower body. That matters. He also has 2 years left on his deal at roughly $18 million per season. That's manageable compared to the very top of the market. The big question is compensation. What would Minnesota want? A second-rounder? A first? Could a player be involved? There's been speculation about quarterback movement league-wide. Could that factor into conversations? It's layered. And then there's Trey Hendrickson. The Bengals chose not to tag him. If they had, it would have cost nearly $30 million because it would have been a second tag. Instead, he's set to become a free agent. And when healthy, he's been one of the league's most productive pressure generators over the past several seasons. Now, he did have core muscle surgery. That's something you have to evaluate medically. But you don't tag a player if you're planning to pay him less annually. So if his projected market is $20 to $25 million per year, free agency might be cleaner than a trade. No draft capital lost, just cap space. And don't forget, the Rams have reportedly indicated they're willing to trade a first-round pick for a proven star. That's the NFC arms race heating up. If division rivals are willing to push chips in, the 49ers can't just sit still. So rank them for me. Crosby, Greenard, or Hendrickson. Who's your top choice? And would you give up a first-round pick for an elite edge? Yes or no? Because now we shift to another major ripple in the league. And this one affects the center market in a huge way. And that could quietly change everything for the 49ers' offensive line strategy. And now we've got one of the most unexpected twists of this entire cycle. Drew Dalman is retiring at 27. Let that sink in for a second. A starting caliber center, still in his prime years, stepping away just one season after signing a major deal in Chicago. That's not something you see often. And while we always respect a player choosing what's best for his life and health, from a roster-building perspective, this changes things immediately. Because now the Bears suddenly have cap space freed up. And when cap space opens, competition increases. And when competition increases, prices go up. Enter Tyler Linderbaum. Linderbaum is now positioned to become the highest-paid center in NFL history. We're talking potentially $20 to $25 million per year. That's elite left tackle money creeping into the center market. And with Chicago needing stability in front of Caleb Williams, you better believe they'll be aggressive. They're not going to leave their young quarterback exposed. So now the question becomes, are the 49ers realistically in that market? At $20 million? Maybe you have a conversation. At $25 million? That becomes extremely difficult when you factor in everything else we've discussed. Edge rushers potentially commanding top dollar, wide receivers flooding the market, cap flexibility shrinking. This is the chess match of team building. You can't pay everyone, and you can't win the offseason headline trophy if it compromises your ability to win the actual Lombardi trophy. And that's the tension right now. Do you fortify the offensive line with a premium center? Or do you pour resources into getting after the quarterback? Because championships are usually won in the trenches, but you have to pick your side carefully. I want you to answer this in the comments. If you had to choose, would you spend big at center or big at edge rusher? Center or edge? Let's see where the faithful land. And just when you think the NFC West couldn't get any more unpredictable, there's another storyline brewing. Kyler Murray's time in Arizona is essentially over. That chapter is closing. And whenever a starting quarterback hits the open market, even a former #1 overall pick, it shakes things up. There's even talk of Jimmy Garoppolo potentially resurfacing somewhere in the division. Imagine that twist. Familiar face, new uniform, same rivalry. The NFC West never stays quiet for long. Zoom out for a moment and look at everything we just walked through. No tag for Eddie Piñeiro, which keeps negotiations flexible. A receiver, market that's opening up. Edge rushers potentially available via trade or free agency. A surprise retirement that's about to inflate the center market. And division rivals signaling they're willing to be aggressive. This offseason isn't just active. It's volatile. And volatile markets reward smart, disciplined front offices. The 49ers don't need to win every headline. They need to win the right battles. So here's the big picture question I'm leaving you with. What is the one move that would make you say, okay, now we're Super Bowl ready?